one of the most damaging things that could then happen, convince the general public as well that we were somehow involved.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, you've just heard Kate's voice, and it's something that the McCanns would say over and over and over again. Nothing should come in the way of the search for Madeleine. But what if one directs that question towards them? And I'm going to be doing that in this video. And it's not a snarky or sarcastic question. It's a sincere question. If you were searching for your own child and you were sincerely enlisting the help of the authorities, also the media, also strangers, for someone that is very familiar to you but completely unfamiliar to them, you would imagine one of the most important things would be giving out a clear, current, recognizable picture, and one taken in Portugal, wouldn't you? Well, is that what happened? By the same token, you'd imagine an eyewitness testimony from a member from their group would also give a clear, recognizable picture of what had actually happened. And is that what happened? Now, do you agree that this isn't rocket science? It should be Search 101. And so when you ask the question, is this picture clear, current, recognizable? What is your impression of it? Where do you think this photo came from? So, first of all, do you think that photo came from the McCanns' camera, the camera that they had with them on the holiday, the camera that was photographed at the crime scene in apartment 5A on the table? Did this image come from that camera? Second, when do you think this photo comes from? What year and what place? Do you agree that this may have been a better photo to hand out to the public? And I've heard a fairly interesting rebuttal saying the picture of Madeleine's eye would be the most important picture because that would be so idiosyncratic. And that's not a bad argument, except to say, when last did you get a very up-close look at a child's eye? I mean, the average person might see a child in passing. Do you agree? In terms of the handout photo, the main thing you want to communicate really is two things. The one is the age of the child, in terms of almost the size of the child, and then also to some extent the hair color. Those are the obvious things that you might see from a distance. And so this particular picture gives a clearer sense that Madeleine's hair was sandy blonde on the sides rather than dark brown, light on the tips as well. And because it's clear and recent, it provides a far more accurate sense of her true age, which was almost 4. Let's put this another way. If you wanted to confuse someone into looking for the wrong person, then you would suggest someone who was either much older or much younger, or had a totally different hair color, perhaps red hair, perhaps dark hair, perhaps curly hair, if the intention was to confuse someone. And so in this analysis, we want to address whether this was the best picture for the authorities to hand out. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I've written 5 books on the McCann case: Doubt, Doubt 2, Doubt 3, and then Deep into Darkness and Deeper into Darkness. Those books are available on Amazon. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So it may seem like a silly question, and I do think we don't ask silly questions often enough in true crime. Like when? Like what actually happened? Like who committed this crime? Do they have an alibi? So let's focus on this handout photo for a moment. This was the first original flyer that went out. And what do you see? Who do you see? I see a little girl with shoulder-length brown hair. How old would you say that she is? All the mothers that are watching this, perhaps fathers as well, do you think she looks like Madeleine in Portugal or not like her? Or do you think it looks a lot like her, but not quite the Madeleine in Portugal? I see a girl with quite dark brown hair, and I see someone that looks to me quite a bit younger than the Madeleine on holiday. Do you see it's not such a ridiculous question to ask after all? And you can't help asking, why do a bunch of doctors who are smart enough to make the right choice when it comes to picking out a photo, why are they making this choice? And is it a good choice or is it a bad choice? Could they have made a better choice? Now, the source of these flyer images is episode 1 of the Netflix documentary, The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann, which documents and reenacts the incident, as well as the immediate aftermath, which included printing and distributing these flyers with Madeleine's face on it. Now, if you think about it, in terms of the media narrative, you almost never see this particular photo because it's a kind of a dated photo of Madeleine. You tend to see this photo arguably the least in the media narrative, whereas it was front and center at this particular time. So what is wrong with this picture? And how come there's a reenactment of narratives done for Netflix, yet it was something the McCanns and the Tapa 7 were loath to do when law enforcement specifically asked them to do it? So if you remember, the group was asked individually what happened that night, and the police couldn't really make too much sense of all of these statements. They seemed at turns inconsistent. And so they said, okay, an easy way to sort this out is just reenact everything the way you remember it, and that way we can figure it out. But then they seem to be reluctant to do that. So episode 1 also pays a lot of attention to the officially debunked Tanner sighting. Why? Why focus on something that's immaterial? The guy Jane Tanner saw has come forward and said essentially, you saw me, it was me. So why repeat a so-called sighting that's not valid? While it's clear that the disappearance of Madeleine McCann is broadly sympathetic to the McCann's cause, again, it's easy to miss obvious details like this. Again, why give out this photo? Does this photo look like Madeleine McCann as she appeared on and around May 3rd, a few days shy of her 4th birthday? Does this photo look like Madeleine McCann in May 2007? And I think a simple way of finding the answer to that is just saying, looking at when was this photo taken? I haven't been able to get that information. Does anyone know the date of that photo? So was it taken in Portugal? If not, when was it taken? Where was it taken? What is the date? And if it wasn't taken in Portugal, and it was taken at a date, let's say, significantly earlier, then why use a photo that is not current in terms of her complexion, in terms of her hair color, and all that kind of thing? The next question to ask is why Kate McCann used this image of Madeleine on the cover of her book, which is arguably an even younger Madeleine than the flyer photo. And bear in mind, the book came out in 2011, which was 4 years after the disappearance. So Madeleine should have been 8 years old, and instead of showing the latest picture of Madeleine, you're showing a picture of her when she looks like 2 years old. Now again, you might argue the single most important aspect in Madeleine's appearance is that mark on her eye that is going to make her identifiable. But that's actually something that you can definitely argue the opposite, is to say that is the one thing that you need to not say, because a perpetrator who's taken her may feel that she'll be so easily identifiable that she's a great risk to that person's safety. And I would say in most cases like this, where someone has a child, you're not going to get face-to-face access to that child. You might see them at a gas station, you might see them in passing, you might see them on a sidewalk while you're in a vehicle, you might be on the sidewalk and see them in a vehicle. You're not going to get that kind of intimate, very close to eye-to-eye kind of contact. And so what you really do want is a sort of basic impression of what Madeleine looks like in passing. So, for example, what did someone on the night Madeleine disappeared, what did they see? And we know that the eyewitness testimony that was given was that she had a certain color hair and that she was a certain length, and that this person approximated her age to be 4 years based on having a granddaughter of the same age. And that turned out to be a very accurate guesstimate. Another witness statement from the same group basically said the same thing, that she had straight long hair to the neck and the color was fair or light brown. This person said she was 60% sure that the girl that she saw was Madeleine. A third member of the group said that he saw a child with blonde hair of medium shade, not very light. And this is to be distinct from the person who was carrying her, who had brown hair, short brown hair, and the child had longer blonde hair. And so how are they identifying and distinguishing these two individuals? Well, on the basis of hair color and estimated age. And so again, if you are asked to identify this child on the basis of brown hair and this mark on the eye, and this idea that you're dealing with possibly a 2-year-old, you would more than likely say, no, I don't think it's the same child, if those were the only images that you had to work with. Do you agree? So I think a more basic question to ask is, do you think the child in these flyers looks like a 4-year-old? And do you think the child in these flyers has blonde hair, or hair that you would describe as blonde in any way, or brown? Now, you could definitely make the argument that maybe it was very early and maybe they did make a mistake. And what about the next picture that they provided? Well, the next picture they provided, you could say, was on May 13th, 10 days, more than a week after the fact. And it was perhaps part of what David Beckham was holding up to the camera. That was an even earlier image of Madeleine McCann, right? And this was definitely not one of the holiday photos. And so, yeah, you're actually going backwards in time, and her hair, if anything, is even darker in this particular image. Madeleine looks even younger. And very soon, this became the de facto image for missing Madeleine. And you could be forgiven for thinking that she was closer to 2 years old rather than closer to 4 years old. Even the Pope blessed an image of Madeleine that looks, I don't know, what do the mothers here say? Is that a 2-year-old? So you see, it's not really an unreasonable question to ask. Couldn't the McCanns have chosen a better selection of images to give to the authorities or the follow-up to publicize around the world? That's a yes or no question. And the follow-up question is, based on the picture alone, were they trying hard enough to make sure Madeleine was recognized and or found? Or put bluntly, did the McCanns really want Madeleine to be found? Now, if you look at what the Tanner sighting did to the investigation, it derailed it for around 5 years. It sent it in the wrong direction and into the wrong area in terms of the timeline. The same question comes up again, doesn't it? Is that by accident? Is that just being silly and making silly mistakes, or by design? If the detective is right and you do have a simulated abduction, then doesn't it stand to reason that you'd also have a simulated, which is to say pretend, search for her as well? Now don't laugh, we have a similar scenario potentially in the JonBenet Ramsey case. A potentially simulated kidnapping, complete with faux ransom note, followed, if this is true, potentially by a simulated effort to investigate the case. This appearance of trying to find someone, only for that case, after a flurry of faux suspects and dead ends, to mysteriously dissolve into nothing. Any idea when the last photo of Madeleine finally made it into the media narrative? Well, May 25th. It had taken more than 3 weeks to provide a current photo of Madeleine as she appeared when she disappeared. By the time that happened, the damage was done. The other Maddie, the younger brown-haired version, had been burned into the collective consciousness in one of the largest missing person media shitstorms in true crime memory. But that's nothing compared to the Ramsey case. If it took 3 weeks for the McCanns to release their last photo, it took the Ramseys 23 years to release this photo. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.